No engines, no steel cranes, no modern machines. Yet this wall still rose into the sky. Before power tools, a castle began as a wound in the landscape, a hill, a quarry, and 1,000 choices. Every stone was lifted by muscle, rope, timber, and calculation. The secret was not magic. It was geometry, discipline, and people who trusted the line. They did use machines, but the engines were human bodies walking inside wood. First came the quarry, because moving stone too far could ruin a lord before the first tower was built. Transport was the battle before the battle. Mud could stop construction as surely as an enemy army. One wrong knot, one rotten plank, one gust, and the castle demanded payment in blood. The lord wanted walls before winter. The masons knew stone did not obey impatience. In 18 minutes, we raise a lord's castle from earth, fire, wood, and human will. A castle was never placed at random. It watched roads, rivers, bridges, farms, and fear. This was strategy before it became architecture. Before towers, there was a line. If that line was wrong, every stone after it would lie. Every decision balanced power, cost, and survival. Medieval builders did not need blueprints as we know them. They carried geometry in tools, memory, and touch. One mistake here would travel upward for years. The first labor was not stonework. It was removing the world that stood where the fortress would stand. The landscape itself became part of the design. Timber was the skeleton of construction. Scaffolds, roofs, carts, cranes, and every temporary formstone depended on. One mistake here would travel upward for years. The ditch was both obstacle and quarry. Earth removed from the ground became the castle's first defense. The landscape itself became part of the design. Even before masonry, the builders shaped height. A castle begins by making attackers climb. The builders read the hill like a manuscript. Good stone had to be close, strong, and workable. Bad stone could doom a wall from the inside. One mistake here would travel upward for years. With no explosives, they persuaded rock to fracture along a chosen path. The builders read the hill like a manuscript. Every detail mattered. A single block could weigh more than a man. Moving it required patience, levers, and nerve. This was strategy before it became architecture. The quarry gave them weight. The masons gave that weight a face. This was strategy before it became architecture. Every detail mattered. Many stones carried a private mark, proof of labor, payment, pride, and memory. This was strategy before it became architecture. Every detail mattered. Stone could not rise without iron. Every chisel, nail, hinge, and clamp began in fire. Each material had a temperament the builders had to learn. The medieval forge was a lung. It fed the tools that fed the castle. The craft was slow because failure was permanent. Mortar began as dangerous chemistry. Limestone burned until it changed its nature. Nothing here moved faster than the limits of the body. Add water too fast, and the lime could burn skin and blind eyes. The craft was slow because failure was permanent. Mortar was not glue alone. It was a breathing skin between stones. The hidden work mattered more than the visible glory. Rope was medieval muscle made visible. Without it, stone stayed on the ground. The hidden work mattered more than the visible glory. Every wagon was a weak point. A cracked wheel could stop an entire wall. Nothing here moved faster than the limits of the body. The scaffold was temporary, but it controlled the permanent. Stone climbed only as high as wood allowed. The hidden work mattered more than the visible glory. Underground work decided the castle's future. A wall is only as strong as what no one sees. Nothing here moved faster than the limits of the body. The first course was a promise. Every later stone would answer to it. The craft was slow, because failure was permanent. For the Lord, it was power. For the builders, it was the beginning of years of labor. The castle's strength began in places no visitor would see. Not every stone needed a crane. Many rose by the oldest machine of all, hands in a line. The hidden work mattered more than the visible glory. A castle wall was not one solid block. It was faces, core, mortar, and trust. Nothing here moved faster than the limits of the body. Inside the clean outer skin was a rough heart, thousands of fragments locked together. This was engineering measured in breadth, rope, and risk. To lift stone higher, they first had to build the machine that would lift it. This was engineering measured in breadth, rope, and risk. The treadwheel was simple, terrifying, and brilliant. A wooden circle that multiplied human effort. The machine was simple, but the danger was not. They walked forward, but the stone climbed upward. That was the genius of the medieval machine. Coordination mattered as much as strength. Now the impossible changed scale. A stone no cart could raise began to float. A single rhythm kept wood, stone, and people alive. A lift was never safe until the stone was bedded and the rope went slack. A single rhythm kept wood, stone, and people alive. Speed could impress a lord. Straightness kept the walls standing. The worksite survived only when every trade trusted the others. Every detail mattered. Day by day, the castle changed the horizon. What had been a hill became command. The machine was simple, but the danger was not. Construction was a river of materials. If one stream stopped, the whole site slowed. A single rhythm kept wood, stone, and people alive. The gate was the castle's throat, where wealth entered and enemies would try to break through. This was engineering measured in breadth, rope, and risk. Even before the gate rose, its traps were being imagined in stone. The machine was simple, but the danger was not. Wood made the gate. Iron made it refuse to yield. The machine was simple, but the danger was not. Every detail mattered. A castle was not built by masons alone. It took cooks, carters, water carriers, rope makers, and families. The worksite survived only when every trade trusted the others. The wall rose on bread, ale, sweat, and the few minutes when tired bodies became human again. The machine was simple, but the danger was not. Winter was the enemy no sword could stop. Mortar cured slowly. Roads vanished into mud. The machine was simple, but the danger was not. The same ditch that defended the castle could drown the work before it was finished. The builders learned because the site punished error. Every medieval wall carried a hidden cost, the courage to climb again after wood had failed. The storm exposed every weak joint and rushed decision. One accident could silence a whole site, but the wall still waited. The builders learned because the site punished error. Every detail mattered. A good builder knew when to stop. The fastest path to a castle was sometimes patience. In this world, patience was a form of strength. In a world of falling stone and uncertain weather, faith stood beside engineering. The storm exposed every weak joint and rushed decision. This is where the castle fought back, not with soldiers, with gravity, weather, and weight. The wall remembers every hand that raised it. The answer was not to conquer nature. It was to listen, reinforce, and begin again. Here, courage had to become procedure. When damage changed the schedule, geometry restored order. Weather could undo in one night what men had built for weeks. Every detail mattered. An arch was a puzzle of pressure. Each wedge had to push against the next. Here, courage had to become procedure. Cold made bodies slow and stones stubborn, but a lord's deadline did not freeze. Survival meant rebuilding smarter, not merely rebuilding faster. Even rope changed with weather. In winter, the simplest tool could betray the hand that trusted it. The builders learned because the sight punished error. But when the wheel turned, winter itself seemed to move aside. At this height, skill and fear shared the same narrow plank. The wall walk was where builders became defenders in imagination. The higher the wall climbed, the smaller the people seemed. Every detail mattered. At this height, fear had to become routine. Geometry turned danger into something that could stand. Every detail mattered. A pulley did not erase weight. It made weight negotiable. Every stone now carried consequences visible from the valley. Every detail mattered. Before an arch could stand, it needed a temporary wooden dream beneath it. Every stone now carried consequences, visible from the valley. When the keystone entered, scattered stones became one force. The castle was becoming both shelter and weapon. Every detail mattered. For a moment, engineering looked like a miracle. Geometry turned danger into something that could stand. Every detail mattered. Every opening was a calculation, enough to see and shoot, not enough to invite death. Each new course made retreat less possible. The curtain wall connected every tower into a single statement: do not come closer. The higher the wall climbed, the smaller the people seemed. Inside the towers, stone learned to coil. The stair made defense vertical. Every stone now carried consequences visible from the valley. Where walls stopped, carpentry began. A castle was not only stone, it was shelter. Every stone now carried consequences visible from the valley. Medieval sites were villages in motion, built to build the greater building. The higher the wall climbed, the smaller the people seemed. The bridge had to welcome friends and become absence for enemies. Every stone now carried consequences visible from the valley. Every detail mattered. A dry moat did not need water to be dangerous. It stole speed, balance, and courage. The castle was becoming both shelter and weapon. Every moving part had to work before war, not during it. The castle was becoming both shelter and weapon. Every detail mattered. To the lord, the castle was authority. To the builders, it was rent, wages, danger, and bread. A siege was defeated long before the first arrow flew. A castle changed more than a skyline. It changed how everyone nearby understood power. Human life filled the spaces that warfare had shaped, and in a violent century, unfinished walls invited ambition. Power needed kitchens, wells, stores, and smoke. Every detail mattered. Suddenly, the castle was no longer a project. It was a race. The fortress was becoming a living world behind stone. When daylight failed, fire took its place. Dangerous, smoky, and not nearly enough. Defense and daily life grew together inside the walls. The castle did not forgive distraction. A siege was defeated long before the first arrow flew. Every detail mattered. The battlements were not decoration. They were rhythm. Cover, opening, cover, opening. The fortress was becoming a living world behind stone. Some defenses were built from timber, hanging over empty air to protect the stone below. A siege was defeated long before the first arrow flew. Rain tested everything: mortar, roof, ditch, patience. The castle learned to feed, watch, close, and endure. Every detail mattered. Inside, the fortress became a household, smoky, crowded, but warmer than the world outside. Human life filled the spaces that warfare had shaped. No castle could survive a siege without water. A well was as strategic as any tower. Defense and daily life grew together inside the walls. When water rose, the castle had a heartbeat. A siege was defeated long before the first arrow flew. Every detail mattered. A fortress was not only walls, it was the ability to wait. Defense and daily life grew together inside the walls. The gate was a wooden animal armored in iron. The fortress was becoming a living world behind stone. Every detail mattered. One door could weigh as much as several oxen. Raising it was a ceremony of force. The gatehouse was the most vulnerable point, and therefore the most engineered. The gatehouse became a trap that could breathe open and slam shut. The defenders were rehearsing a future attack before it came. When the doors closed, the worksite became a fortress. The defenders were rehearsing a future attack before it came. Every detail mattered. The castle was never empty stone. It was noise, smell, labor, hunger, and command. The gatehouse was the most vulnerable point, and therefore the most engineered. Inside the walls, heat meant survival and status. Every moving part had to obey under fear. Every detail mattered. The Lord would remember the hall as glory. The builders would remember the weight. The castle's power lay in slowing the enemy down. In medieval stone, defense and devotion stood side by side. Every moving part had to obey under fear. Every detail mattered. The builders made the wall. The garrison learned how to make it dangerous. The gatehouse was the most vulnerable point, and therefore the most engineered. The castle watched through wounds in its own stone. The castle's power lay in slowing the enemy down. Every detail mattered. Height, ditch, wall, and angle worked together. The castle defeated movement before it defeated men. The gatehouse was the most vulnerable point, and therefore the most engineered. By the end, even the crane seemed like part of the castle's body. The defenders were rehearsing a future attack before it came. Then, piece by piece, the temporary world disappeared. In the stone, their discipline outlasted their names. Every detail mattered. At last, the hill had become a machine for command. What remained was not just construction, but consequence. Every detail mattered. The Lord received the keys. The builders carried the scars. The castle stood because hundreds of small acts had aligned. Every detail mattered. History often remembers the patron's name. Stone remembers the hands. In the stone, their discipline outlasted their names. Every detail mattered. The first quiet morning after completion may have felt unreal. The finished wall turned labor into authority. Every detail mattered. What they built was not only defense, it was administration, shelter, theater, and memory. The people who built it were already becoming invisible to history. Behind every grand wall were small signatures almost no one was meant to see. What remained was not just construction, but consequence. The real machine was not the crane. It was the entire system. Landscape, craft, law, hunger, faith, and muscle. The last view is quiet because the struggle has entered the stone. A castle was completed not when the last stone was set, but when life began to move through it. In the stone, their discipline outlasted their names. They raised castles without engines because their greatest machine was cooperation. The wall remembers every hand that raised it.